But right now, we've got if Bill's right and everybody on Capitol Hill is cynical and saying there's no way that the overall jobs bill passes in its current form, we're just going to keep on going at it. I want everybody to be clear. My intention is to insist that each part of this, I want an explanation as to why we shouldn't be doing it. Each component part. Putting people back to work, rebuilding our roads, putting teachers back in the classroom, tax cuts for small businesses and middle-class families, tax breaks for our veterans. We will just keep on going at it and hammering away until something gets done. And I would love nothing more than to see Congress act so aggressively that I can't campaign against them as a do-nothing Congress. All right? Thank you very much, everybody.
President Obama wrapping up his morning press conference this morning. This is the first news conference since the president announced his $447 billion jobs bill earlier in September. We have assembled a mega mind panel for you to talk about this. Joining me now is Ed Schultz, host of The Ed Show, Dylan Ratigan, host of MSNBC's Dylan Ratigan Show, NBC News White House correspondent Mike Vaquera, and we also have former Labor Secretary Robert Reich under President Clinton. Ed, I want to start with you. The narrative that the president is giving here is basically Obama is for jobs, the right is an obstructionist. How is he doing?
Keep on going at it. This president is focused. I think this is one of the best press conferences he has ever had. He's on message. He's on point. He is telling the Senate, if you don't vote for this, you need to go home and explain to your constituents what's bad about it. It has everything in it that the Republicans have advocated for in the past, and that's tax cuts for workers and tax cuts for small businesses. I think it's a home run for the president, and he kept coming back to it. It's about jobs. It's about jobs right now. And he also outlined what the Republicans have been saying in the meetings that he's had with them about things that they wanted to do, which are good long-term things that he has agreed to. But where is their plan right now? They don't have one, and I think the president drove that home today.
Ed, does it go far enough?
I think it goes far enough right now, and it's going to be paid for. $447 billion. The president also stepped up today and asked millionaires and billionaires and threw himself in that group, saying, I've got to pay more. We've got to ask them to do their fair share. It will not add to the deficit. He's challenging the American people, challenging the polls, challenging the Republicans. Show me your plan, and oh, by the way, go get it scored by the same independent economists that say that my plan is going to work. I think it's a great moment for the president and the country, and I think the country is on this story. It's about jobs. It's about now.
Dylan, I've been lucky enough to have you on set for the last half an hour, so I'm going to let you jump in there.
Well, Ed, can I ask you a couple of questions? Because part of me agrees with what you just said, particularly the alignment. I think we all feel that the president has finally stepped out and said and identified the issue that we have to address and is putting himself at risk politically in order to advocate it in a way that I think we all have tremendous respect for and have been waiting for. Here's where I run into questions, and I'd be interested in how you resolve it. You and I both know that 20% of America is unemployed. That's 60 million people. If you take the president's number, 9% of the country is what he said in the press conference is unemployed. That's 25 to 30 million people. Here, can I tell you what frustrates me, Ed, and as I look here not from a political standpoint, but as an American and as a journalist, is I have two political parties. I have a Republican Party whose only objective is to make sure that there's no jobs created so that they can get in there and make this guy look bad. And then I have another president, and President Barack Obama, who's, by my view, could not be better intentioned, more impassioned, and more committed. But the best case scenario for his jobs plan is 1.2 million jobs, which is less than 3% of the problem. It's what they call on Wall Street a delta. And if you come with a solution for a problem, if I go to you, Ed, and I say, listen, I need $1 billion of something, and you come back to me with 5 million of them, and the other guy says, I want none of them, and my choice is 5 million and 0, I'm obviously in favor of the guy who wants 5 million, or in this case, 1 million. But I and the rest of America have a right to be frustrated with this entire apparatus for its refusal to acknowledge the size of the problem and address it on a scale that will solve it, as opposed to in a way that gets either 1 million jobs for Obama to get reelected or torpedoes 1 million jobs in order to get the Republicans in, which is good perhaps for their power balance, but ultimately does nothing to address the underlying issue of 30 to 60 million unemployed as a result of, again, in my view, an auction for trade policy, an auction for tax policy that Obama, by the way, is a victim of. This is not an indictment of the man. We have an auction for policies that dictate what creates tens of millions of jobs, and these people are locked in a battle between a good bunch of people that want to create some jobs as a optical progression and a bad bunch of people that don't want to create jobs so they can get power.
Ed, does it address the Delta, like Dylan brings up?
You're not going to do this overnight, and the president has been very upfront about this all along. The president has also been willing to put his political capital on the line with his own base, saying that we're going to have to make some tough cuts. In business, as you well know, Dylan, there's a 1-year plan, there's a 5-year plan, there's a 10-year plan. You're not going to be able to put the whole enchilada on the table at one time and just catch all in a magic wand is waving it.
Hold on. Let me ask you a question.
I didn't interrupt you, Dylan.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't interrupt you.
But I want to address that.
No, I don't care what you want to address. I didn't interrupt you.
Please don't. I'm not upset, and I apologize. I don't mean to upset you. I apologize.
All right, gentlemen, time out. Let's go. Ed.
Do I have the floor?
You do.
Okay, thank you. The president has put forth a plan that will put several million people to work right now.
1.2 million.
It's a start. It is a start. Where's the Republican start? You want the whole thing to happen right?
Ed, did you hear what I just said?
I got to go back and do my radio show. I'm not going to be interrupted by Dylan.
Ed, we'll let you go back to your radio show. Robert Reich, we want to bring you in as the labor secretary watching, former labor secretary under President Clinton, and listening to what the President Obama just had to say about trying to sell this jobs bill on the Hill. What's your take?
Well, he said all of the right things. The problem and the frustration I have is, number one, his style was so subdued. There was not very much indignation. I mean, given that we have so many people unemployed, given that this is the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, I would have wanted President Obama, and, you know, it's not the first time that he disappoints a little bit on the indignation scale, but I would have wanted him to be a little bit more forceful in terms of the scale of the problem. Secondly, just to go back to what Dylan was saying a moment ago, what his proposal amounts to is really very modest. And what he could say so clearly to the American people, he almost did, is that this is a beginning, but this is not nearly what we need to do. The third thing that I was slightly frustrated by is that he just got off track. When he talked about the European debt crisis as being the major headwind we now face in this country, that's just not the case. I mean, that plays into the Republican view that our demand, our consumers, our workers who are so overwhelmed in debt and job losses and lower wages, they can't buy. That's the major problem for this country right now, and the Republicans refuse to acknowledge it. It's not Europe, it's right here. It's our workforce, and that is the major problem we face.
Mike, I want to bring you into the conversation. I know you were watching this press conference. Explain to us the different tone of questions that the president had to take on, because it started out with the Jobs Act, and then it also moved into Occupy Wall Street and the fact that no one is being prosecuted for any of the fraud that took place.
Well, first of all, let me follow up on what Secretary Reich and Dylan was saying in terms of an optical progression. The biggest optical progression has been more of a regression in terms of jobs. Tomorrow is that magical, or some would say devilish Friday, the first Friday of every month when we're going to get those new jobs numbers. And so while everybody's not holding their breath because the president's own economists have predicted that the jobless rate is going to remain above 8% well through next year, averaging on into the November election, a lot of people are going to be looking at that here at the White House, hoping that it at least ticks down. Look, this press conference is simply an extension of what the president has been doing in a different venue over the course of the last several weeks, ever since he gave that speech before a joint session of Congress. And undeniably, it happens in a political context, and that's why the president came back to our friend Bill Plant's question at the end there. Plant asked him simply, Mr. President, are you campaigning or are you negotiating? Are you campaigning against a do-nothing Congress a la Harry Truman, or are you actually sincere in your negotiating? And the president, obviously ready for that, he came back to it again. He says, if Congress does something, then I can't run against a do-nothing Congress. So the attitude here at the White House now, as we enter this undeniably political season, post-Labor Day is that just because Republicans object to it doesn't mean it's not a good idea economically and politically, Thomas.
Dylan, when we talk about the fact that, and as Robert Reich was saying, that this might be considered to be modest, but isn't modest a good start when the president is saying he's up against a do-nothing Congress
and yes,
that doesn't want to let him go through with anything?
I didn't mean to frustrate Ed, and I feel bad about that. I think that Robert Reich characterized it perfectly. The president is wonderfully pushing in the direction I think everybody in this country wants to push, which is to create work and prosperity in America. I think that the frustration people like myself, and I can't speak for the former Labor Secretary, feel is if you approach a problem that is a 30 million jobs problem and you harness the energy that is available to a man in the position this man is in, the President of the United States, and don't have the courage to stand before the American people and say, listen, this is the size of the problem that we face. I cannot solve this problem by myself. I want to enroll every one last of you Americans to help me address this issue, which is we together need to create 30 million jobs in order to preserve and expand our prosperity. What do you think the barrier to that messaging is, Mr. Secretary?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the big problems here, I don't think there's any barrier to that message, but one thing the president could have emphasized more, I wish he had, is that Ben Bernanke, even Ben Bernanke says, Ben Bernanke, Republican appointee, head of the Fed, says we are on the brink. We are on the cusp of going into a double-dip recession. Most Americans have not got out of the first recession in terms of being a jobs recession, or, let's face it, this is a jobs depression. And also, we have the risk right now. If the Republicans hold absolutely pat, if they dig in their heels, and they're showing every sign of doing that, that we will not have an extension of unemployment benefits, we will not have an extension of the payroll tax cut. In other words, the government and government spending will contract at the very time we're heading into possibly a double dip, and we've got all of these millions of Americans who are unemployed. This is just simply, this is a situation that cries out for a president to say, no, I'm not going to take it, the American people are not going to take it, and I am going to lead the American people in a campaign against this do-nothing Republican Congress, Republican House.
And we're going to have to leave it right there. Gentlemen, I want to say thank you. Dylan Ratigan, thanks. Our thanks also to former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, NBC's Mike Vaquera, of course, Ed Schultz as well. We thank him for joining me, and I want to promote, we've got a fired-up host here that you're going to see at 4 p.m. today, Dylan Ratigan, his show, The Dylan Ratigan Show, and then The Ed Show, live at 10 o'clock, another fired-up broadcaster you're going to see tonight. Craig Melvin picks up our coverage next with more on the death of Apple founder Steve Jobs. We're back right after this.